Hey, welcome back to Money Match. It's Ian Ardill here, where we're matching up your money with your life goals. Today, I'm joined together with somebody who's actually on my team, Andris Pone, because I wanted to talk about something that is near and dear to my heart, which is tax, or therefore wanting to pay the least amount of tax possible. And it is, well, at the time of this recording, RRSP season. Thanks so much for joining with me today.
I'm thrilled to be here, Ian. Thank you so much.
Andris, you've been hanging out with me for a couple of years now. What's your role here at Ardill Group?
Well, I think it's been longer than a couple of years. I hope it, I'm glad that it seemed fast. That's good. It's been, I think this will be 6 years. 6 years now. Yeah. So, very happy
and,
for this relationship.
and what's your role?
Well, I support Ardill Group with all of their communications. So it started with defining or helping you and your team define your brand. In other words, your points of difference and where you're going and how you're going to get there and all that stuff. And then supporting you with my team in terms of logo, website, photography, video, ongoing marketing, all that kind of stuff, including this podcast.
Well, thanks. And so today we're doing something fun. We're kind of doing a little switcheroo, and I'm going to get you to kind of drill me, because I wanted to talk about something that is near and dear to my heart, which is tax, or therefore wanting to pay the least amount of tax possible. And it is, well, at the time of this recording, RRSP season. Wondering if you want to take it from there and let me know what you want to know.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Ian. My pleasure. RRSP season is here, and there's some very basic questions on people's minds. And I'm just going to start with a really simple question that gets asked every year. So maybe the answers haven't been so clear, but here's your big opportunity. How does an RRSP work?
A quick crash course on this is really simple. The money that goes in gets taken off your top line of tax. And I think that's really key because, we in Canada have a graded tax system, meaning the first dollar is different from your last dollar. So the first dollar in, you're getting taxed at a lower rate, whereas your top dollar or your last dollar is getting taxed at a much higher rate. And therefore, when you do a RRSP contribution, you're reducing that top line down. It's a direct income that gets pulled off of your T1 general filing when you file with the CRA on your taxes. So it gives some tax relief. And then on top of that, you get the number 2 added value. And this is something that most people overlook or don't pay attention to, is it's growing 100% sheltered of taxation while it's in the RRSP or RIF. RRSP is really the same thing as an RRIF. A registered retirement income fund is something that somebody gets when they are drawing income off of their funds, either annually, monthly, quarterly, doesn't really matter, but they're drawing money off of it. When they're putting money into it, it's an RRSP. It's the same thing from a CRA perspective, but when we're putting money into it, it's growing sheltered of taxation. So it's fully taxable when it comes out. It gives us a tax break when it goes in, but it's growing sheltered of tax. And that's the key one. Growth that's sheltered of tax is very, very powerful and oftentimes overlooked.
So thank you very much for that. And there really is an important point to be made there around the RRSP being a mechanism of tax deferral?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not. It's very different from a TFSA, which is tax-free savings account. It is a deferred mechanism of taxation.
Okay. And how about pros and cons around the deferral? And maybe there's this impression that, hey, I never have to pay tax on an RRSP. No, that's not how it works. It's a deferral. So maybe a word on pros and cons of tax deferral.
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, everybody's circumstance is a little bit different. So, it's really hard to pull from this podcast and this conversation what is the right choice for you individually. I'd certainly encourage you to talk with our team or talk with your designated professional. But certainly there's a value in looking at RSPs as a incredible tool. And one of the biggest things that we look at is kind of when somebody gets over the $50,000 mark. If somebody's income is below 50,000, the benefits of that tax savings starts to diminish. And one actually should consider exploring putting those dollars and cents towards a TFSA instead of an RRSP. And so, but when income is above 50 to 55,000, that's really when the magic starts to happen, that the savings from a tax standpoint is getting to be more significant, and therefore really should be considered as a primary tool of savings, at least for those first dollars that qualify for your RRSP.
Okay, so you've mentioned the TFSA, which is a newer tax saving opportunity for Canadians. And put simply, what is the difference between an RRSP and a TFSA?
Great question. So when you put a contribution into a TFSA, you get zero tax write-off. It is zero benefit whatsoever in that calendar year. However, the growth is also sheltered of taxation, just like an RRSP. So an RRSP and a TFSA, if it grows by 5%, 10%, 20%, it doesn't really matter the growth. As it grows, both options are 100% sheltered of taxation in the growth period. But when you pull it out, that's the big winner on a TFSA. When you pull out a TFSA dollar, it's 100% tax-free. Whereas when you pull out money out of an RRSP, it is fully taxed. So, not nearly as exciting, but way more exciting when you're putting it in.
Okay, so you're making the TFSA sound like, well, why wouldn't everyone only use a TFSA? Why wouldn't everyone only use a TFSA? Why use an RRSP at all?
Yeah, great question. One of the things that I did was I started looking at the question of, trying to map it out on Excel, of trying to figure out, okay, what is truly the benefit here, and why should somebody get excited about putting money in an RSP? Because one of the things that I face with my clientele is clients that typically are at the higher echelon of taxation. They pay a lot of tax. And so how do they avoid or mitigate taxation to the best of their abilities? And is RSPs really still useful? And the other thing that oftentimes I get a question is, like, when should they stop? Like, if you have somebody, going into their late 50s or 60s, why should somebody still contribute to an RSP? And really, to top it off, is if you're a business owner and you've got corporate funds, should you be drawing money out of that corporation just to fund an RRSP? Because anytime a dollar leaves the corporation and moves into one's personal pocket, it really stings, and it's very expensive from a taxation standpoint. So why trigger that tax unnecessarily and shove it into an RSP? And so certainly that's something that I started running the math on. Andris, are you excited yet?
I'm totally excited. I'm very excited. And I think you actually might have some calculations that you can show us
Yeah.
on.
So if you're jumping into this conversation and you're listening to us, no problem. We're gonna put a few things into the show notes just in terms of explanation. But generally speaking, if you're able to look at this and you're really interested in the calculations, number one is jump on YouTube, watch the video of this. And number two, if you really want to take a detailed dive in terms of your personal scenario, I certainly am always happy to chat with anybody about the value of RRSPs. So, if you will, I just want to highlight a couple things just to kind of noteworthy is the deadline for RSP season this year for the tax year of 2025 is March 3rd. So you want to make sure that you're keenly aware of that. It is a calculation that shows up on your T1 General. And it's a rolling number. So if you don't max out your previous year, it carries forward to the following year. And so the only way you're going to find that out is either on the CRA website or also on your T1 General filing that you either did yourself or you had an accountant prepare for you. And so you're going to want to make sure that you are aware of your contribution limit. No one ever wants to over contribute because, again, the goal here is to lower your tax base, not to kind of increase tax filing burdens by kind of getting penalized here. So make sure that you're aware of those things. And so a couple of things that I just thought it was kind of fun is what I did was I kind of picked a tax rate. And Andris, keep in mind, I'm going to get you to pick a different tax rate later on in our conversation. But for the purposes of this conversation, I picked the top marginal tax rate of, believe it or not, in Ontario, you are going to pay 53.53%. So almost 50 freaking 4%. And that is a lot of tax. And so imagine that when for every dollar you're making above the $258,000 range, every dollar, 54 cents goes to the government. Stinger. So when we put money into an RSP, obviously we're creating some tax benefit. So if we max out our 2025 amount, which is 32,000 and change, we're able to generate out of the top marginal tax bracket 17 grand. Okay, so just let that sit in for you for a moment. 32,000 goes in. The government literally gives you back 17 grand.
That sounds like a great deal.
Yeah, that's like making 54% return on your money. Now, I mean, again, I'm not equating for the money coming out and being taxed later. But the point is, yeah, in terms of trying to maximize the use and control of your dollars, we want to make sure that we're maximizing every single penny. And so the dollars that you can not spend on tax or get eroded in taxation every year, it's powerful. It's better to be in your pocket for as long as possible than being evaporated and being sucked up into the orbit of taxation. Make sense?
I love it. Evaporated, sucked up into, yeah.
So as I drop down into our spreadsheet here, and if you're listening audibly speaking, that the increase in room is generated by the CRA. The CRA will announce every year what is the max contribution room for the next year. But generally speaking, what I've done is I've just indexed it. And so I've projected it in theorized based on what we expect the consumer price index is going to be. And we just kind of made a little bit of an educated guess. And I said, okay, what would happen if we maximized our RRSP contribution from the age of 40 all the way up to 71? And in 71 would be the last year, because then we have to convert that into a registered retirement income fund. So we make the conversion. We have to start drawing income. We can do that beforehand. But again, I've just kind of made some assumptions. And one of the key assumptions here is that as that number keeps climbing, and again, it's, just simply indexed, what I've done is I've used a rate of return. And the rate of return is simply 6%. And again, I'm not promising you that 6% return. We're not talking about GICs, but generally speaking, in the world of investments, a 6% return is considered fairly modest, fairly conservative. And again, I'm not talking about investment vehicles right now. I'm just talking about, a reasonable projection on the investment return. So 6%, I'm assuming that we're going to get 6% every single year.
Ian, can I ask you, is that before or after inflation?
No, that's just a straight skinny 6. So I haven't indexed it at all for inflation. Okay. So you want to take a guess what the account value is rolling into age 72? It's a whopping $4.2 million.
That's impressive.
So if you don't take huge risk on your investments, but just, steady Eddie, steady as she goes, and you're able to achieve an average of 6% a year on your investments, and you max out your RSPs from age 40 all the way to now you're into retirement at 72 years of age, you're going into those drawdown years with $4.2 million.
That's incredible, very impressive. And it's important to note that the 6% per year on average there, it's not a number in the face of volatility. You're talking about, you use the term steady Eddie. You're talking about prudent long-term investments and not and being conservative.
Yeah, I think there's two ways to look at investments, kind of, chasing the flavor of the month, chasing more high octane returns. And then there's other ways of just saying, hey, let's ride, a little bit more of a stabilized return. Not to say you're going to get 6% every year. Some years are going to be above that. Some years are going to be below that. Some years might even be a negative return. But when you balance out an average return, that's how I'm picking out a 6%. I'm just picking an average return of 6%. And again, we can adjust that number on the fly here. But where I want to get to is to say, let's assume that we get 4.2 million as an investment account. I've got to assume that we're going to pay tax now on those dollars. Yeah. And if I draw that out, still assuming a top tax tier of 53%, if I just continue to pull that out between age 72 to age 85, I'm going to pay a lot of tax. In fact, I'm going to pay $2.9 million in taxation. And so you might say, well, why would I want to do that? Sounds like a lot of tax. And so what a lot of times people do is avoid RRSPs because they hear about this horrible tax experience. And by the way, anybody who's in a drawdown scenario that has RRSPs, they hate it because they see the tax bill. And so they're seeing a massive erosion on their spending power because of taxation. And so what I'm assuming is that these individuals haven't lowered their taxable income tax brackets. And I'm just assuming that they're maintaining a higher tax consequences in later years. And so therefore I'm not prorating it down. What I mean by that is, a lot of times people think, oh, your higher income earning years is you're going to pay a higher amount of tax. And then in retirement, you're going to be at a lower tax bracket and therefore you can pay less tax. What if that's not true? What if tax rates are higher? What if you're going to have other income sources that are going to push that income bracket still just as high? And so what I'm doing is I'm trying to answer that faux pas of saying, let's just continue to pay a really high rate of tax. The end result is that we're not going to be able to experience the full $4.2 million in that investment account because we now got to pull it out in tax. but it's going to continue to grow even though we're pulling on it. And so now we're just paying taxes on the money that's getting yanked out, and we are able to generate $3.8 million tax-free. After tax, sorry, not tax-free, after tax. So after I pay the tax man, I now have $3.8 million in your pocket.
That sounds good. That sounds really good.
So what's the alternative? The alternative is to say, well, boy, I think I can do just as good with the same kind of investment strategy. Again, I'm using apples for apples. I'm not increasing my investment risk strategy. I'm going to maintain a 6. What could I do alternatively? And so again, I'm not including the TFSA in these accounts because ultimately I'm debating RSP versus not RSP. Okay, so if I was to use the exact same amount of pre-tax dollars, what would it look like? And so the pre-tax dollars don't change. Again, the total injection that I'm putting into the pre-tax dollar conversation is just over $1.5 million. So from the age 40 down to 71 years of age, I'm putting 1.5 million in. And the same conversation is true, except now I'm paying the income tax bill. Okay, I'm paying the income tax bill and I'm using what's left. And so now what's going into the investment account is no longer that really exciting, 30 some odd thousand in year one. I'm only getting, after paying the income tax, AKA $17,000 of income tax on that same amount of money of 32 grand that would have gone into the RSP. I'm only left with 15 grand.
Wow. Not great.
And I think one of the key points that I want to make sure that's captured here is that now that 15 grand is fully taxable as it grows. Now we can get creative around it. And so what I did was I taxed every single dollar at a capital gains rate. And I haven't messed around at the time of this recording. Thank goodness we're still hanging out at a 50% capital gains rate. So again, I'm being modestly in mind of buying equities. I'm not buying GICs or any other fixed income vehicles. I'm just assuming that I'm going to realize the capital gains every single year on a 6% growth. And to compare apples to apples so that we have a fair comparison, I'm paying the tax bill annually out of the investment vehicle. Okay, so it's not like I'm using an additional source. I'm just wanting to make a really, really clean comparison. The net results are at age 72, going into retirement, we now only have 1.4, almost $1.5 million. That's it.
Damn, what a massive difference.
Yeah, and we get an erosion effect that now, like in terms of drawing things out, yeah, it feels a lot better because we're triggering a lot less taxation now in the retirement years, but we end up with only $2 million of after-tax draw. And so what I want to do is I would just want to give a comparison really, really clearly at a snapshot level. At age 72, option number one, you got 4.2 million versus 1.5. Massive differential. The total drawdown from an after-tax standpoint is 3.8 versus 2 million. So it works out to being 86% differential. You're able to generate 86% more from an after-tax dollars perspective.
So important to know these facts. I mean, people who, and you're working with very sophisticated clients, many of them business owners and entrepreneurs, and still there persists this idea among some folks that the pain at the end there isn't worth it. And what you're saying is it very, very obviously is, and it's a pretty obvious business decision. Totally.
And so one of the things I thought what I'd love to do with you, Andris, is I'd love to kind of address some of the key questions that get I get faced with, it, and kind of let the numbers speak for themselves.
Please.
So one of the questions that I get is, should I draw money out of my corporation to fund my RSP? And, I know I mentioned it before, but, I think it's unique to every circumstance. Like if somebody was looking at, should I keep my powder dry because I'm not sure what my business expenses are going to be, or maybe you're wanting to make an active business investment in the corporation, and because of that, you're wanting to keep your powder dry, or you're not sure what the forecasted income is going to be on your business. Absolutely, one should keep more money dry powder in the corporation, 100%.
Okay.
The difference that I want to highlight here is to say, what if somebody has $1 or $100,000 or whatever the amount is, and they're trying to figure out what to do with that dollar in their hand, and it's currently in their corporate name, and they're saying, hey, I want to use this dollar for retirement. So they're clearly saying, I don't need it for my business. What do I do with it? This is where I would say there's value in still taking it out, triggering the tax, paying the higher amount of taxation, and shoving it into an RSP. And the reason for it is because eventually it's still got to come out of the corporation. And you're saying, well, I can defer the taxation in the corporation. But whether you leave it in the corporation or you take it out and put it in the RSP, again, it's a neutralization. So if you take a dollar or $100,000 out and you neutralize it by putting it in the RSP, essentially it's a wash, right? So in that given year, you're not generating any additional benefit, but you're missing that long-term compound effect. Because remember, in the corporation, it's taxed. It's still being taxed as a passive asset in a corporation, whereas in the RSP, it's sheltered of taxation. Very, very powerful. And so one should recognize the value in not necessarily the tax savings in any given year, because all of a sudden now a corporate owner isn't generating necessarily a tax savings because they could hold that income up in the corporation. However, if they're able to pull it down, invest it into an RSP, now there's value. Now there's value from an ongoing, repeatable standpoint. The only tweak or the only differential there is I would have those types of clients max out their TFSAs first. So again, it's a unique scenario where we just kind of need to dialogue with each of our clients on their individual circumstances.
Of course, because everyone is different.
Yeah, totally. So I want to kind of get into something here that I think is the next one that I find oftentimes I get hit with. What if you're in your later years? And so, let's pretend that now we go back to the RSP page. And what if you're not 40? What if you're not 45? What if you're old? What if you're like, what if what if you're in your 50s?
Oh man.
What if you're in your 60s? Oh man. And my apologies for anybody who's in that category. Age seems to sneak up on all of us. But Andris, I know you're young. You're in your 30s right now.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't care. I don't care.
For those who can't see Andris, Andris has got a little more season under his step. But what I will say here on this, if we drop down, say age, I don't know, why don't we pick an age of say age 60? What if we start drawing RSPs at age, start impacting or investing into our RSP at age 60? Is there still value? So let's just imagine we drop that number down to age 60. Mm-hmm. What would happen? Well, obviously we're dealing with a lot less pre-tax dollars. We're now just talking about 450 some odd thousand of pre-tax dollars. Mm-hmm. But nevertheless, we're able to generate a significant tax savings. And all of those same benefits are also still true. And so we didn't get that same compounded return runway that a 40-year-old or a 50-year-old would have. But if we drop over and we kind of say, okay, if we compare the two, the results speak for themselves. We're still able to draw out over 50% more dollars.
Still totally worth it. It's not too late.
There's never too late a time. If somebody's generating income, should somebody be maxing out their RSP contribution? The answer is yes. If you're 60 years of age and you're still generating an income through the corporation or actually active in your business or working as an employee, you should be maxing it out until the very last moment where you're no longer generating significant income. You should be maxing it out all the way along. Because in this scenario, you end up with 55% more after-tax spendable dollars.
And tell us what the numbers are, Ian, for people who are just listening.
Yeah, so from 72 down to 85, drawdown is 660 after-tax in an RSP, whereas in a open unregistered account where you're paying your capital gains every single year, you end up with 390. So you end up with 55% more. Isn't that cool?
More than you would have if you had invested the money outside of the RRSP.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Last thing I wanted to play with, Andris, is I thought I'd love to just ask the question really on what if we mess around with the rate of return?
Yeah.
Or what if we mess around with the income tax bracket? What if we're not at the top marginal tax bracket? Do some of these principles still apply? So which one do you want to do first?
Let's talk about the return, the investment return. I mean, 6% is conservative. Let's say I don't know. What would you think is a little more assertive but not unreasonable?
Why don't we go for 8%?
Let's go for 8%.
All right. So remember, our number from a 40-year-old perspective is generating an 86% differential.
Okay.
So if I drop down and I increase this rate of return, okay, so if we change that investment return number from 6 to 8, what's going to happen is we end up with a very significant differential. We end up seeing a significant jump where now that total value, that total RSP account value jumps over $1 million. It jumps up to $5.6 million when somebody enters into a drawdown period at age 72. And, with the open account, it jumps, but the jump is less significant. Remember, I've just jumped the exact same dollar for dollar, percentage for percentage, and I've jumped the return from 6 to 8. And it sounds great, but the problem is that we're paying more capital gains every single year. So the returns is a little bit more muted. And so the gap actually grows as the investment return grows. The gap is more dramatic. And because essentially the tax burden all the way along is more significant. And so, yes, we're going to pay more after-tax dollars as we draw these dollars out. But the total after-tax dollars draw from 72 down to 85 is $6 million.
Love it. Wow.
Whereas on unregistered basis, we only jump up to 2.7. So I'll take it. It's better than what it was before. But boy, oh boy, the significance of the value of the RSPs that's deferred or sheltered of taxation is quite dramatic. And we end up with a differential of 124%.
Awesome. And that's only a 2% difference in the annual investment return from 6% to 8%.
Yes, sir. So let's go. I'm going to go back to the 6% differential. And I want to kind of mess around with the tax rate, because right now we've been hanging out with the tax rate conversation, and ultimately there is a graded tax system which we've already made reference to. So I want to dive into this for a moment. If we drop that tax rate even down to 25% for the sake of time, and we pay 25% all the way along, the savings on the RSP contributions is going to be less dramatic. But also the tax that we're having to pay when we're pulling it out is also going to be less dramatic. So how do we compare apples to apples? And so if we have the tax rate change on both the RSP accounts and the non-RSP account, the difference, it's still significant. Check out these numbers. The after-tax draw, as we described before, remember I dropped it back down to 6%, was 4.8 million. A total after-tax draw versus, 3.7 million. Well, the 3.7 million is that much more attractive. Why? Because we didn't have to spend as much on income tax all the way along. Remember, we were dealing with the same pre-tax dollars, and now I was able to invest more dollars. So now I've almost been able to invest double the amount of dollars into an account. And so I'm accounting for that. So we see a very significant lift there. But even with that significant lift, there's still a 31% differential.
So you don't have to be in the highest tax bracket. That's what you're saying here.
It's exactly what I'm saying. If you're paying, more than 25% on your income tax bracket, you should be considering an RSP as a part of your overall retirement investment strategies, period.
Thank you so much for that, Ian. My last question, under what circumstances should someone call you? Who needs to give you a call?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, anybody who is earning a reasonable income where they're facing taxation. And I'm not suggesting that lower income people don't earn a good income or what have you. I'm not minimizing anybody. I'm just saying if you're paying a lot of tax, you should be using an RSP as a tool, and you should be talking to your investment professional. If you ever want a second opinion or an additional thought around how you're structuring your RSPs, we're here to help. At Ardill Group, any one of our team members is here to help and looks forward to the opportunity to work with you on your retirement and investment goals.
And people should move fairly promptly at this point. The RSP contribution deadline is coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. RSPs are something that somebody should be considering all year round as a part of their overall strategy. But there is a hard deadline that the CRA makes. It is non-negotiable. March 3rd, it's coming thick and fast. So make sure that you're aware of what you can contribute to your RSPs for the 2025 tax season.
Okay, thank you so much, Ian.
Thanks so much, Andris. So appreciate hanging out with you as always. Have a great one.
You too.